Hi, I'm Reverend Paula Skiles with Unity Church of San Marcos. I'm wondering how you're doing on our third Sunday of Lent. Are you finding that this time of soul work helps you be more aware of Spirit's presence? And I also wonder if you're finding it easy or hard to to express, to release whatever it was you chose into the altar of love within your being. And I would ask you maybe to consider leaving your comments about your experience in our comment section, or something that would help me to understand maybe where you are. And in the end, I'm wondering, most importantly, are you believing that you will have a miracle at the end? I'm grateful for you being with me as we explore in this message today entitled, Ready for a Miracle, just that subject. This will be part one of two messages about a miracle of resurrection. And we're going to take Jesus' life and the teachings that he held as his miracle of resurrection gives us a better understanding of that experience in our own lives. And Easter is a time in which we really kind of devote a soul work to that. Have you ever prayed for a miracle? I know I have. Many of us have prayed for miracles. And many of us have experienced them. I have. You probably have too. But did you ever realize that the coin of a miracle, what it costs, so to speak, does it take, is power, spiritual power. And in order for you and I to learn more about spiritual power, let's study Jesus' life, who embodied spiritual power to such a degree that his divinity was fully expressed. And he was able to not only own it and access it and express that spiritual power in wonderful ways to heal and to create greater good, but he also did so much to try and teach you and I how to do the same. And so it's valuable to study the life of someone. And so if you would join me in this message, let us take an understanding with us that the reason we do so is because your life, my life, it's all about power. I'm not talking about a power trip. I'm not even talking necessarily about power the way that your friends or your peers might understand it. But spiritual power, that legacy that you and I are born with, that creative power that we are given to express and to create greater good in this world, and that we were given. And you and I are called, everyone is called, to take that power we have and to use it wisely, and to create a maturity with our choices, and to create a greater good in this world. It is what that power is designed for and meant for, and it is something that is really wonderful to learn about. So, in studying his life, we see Jesus encounter temptations. There are inherent temptations within using power in our lives, and spiritual power is something so essential. It is the underlying energy with which we bring our dreams and our hopes and our fulfillments forward, or make them a reality. Okay? And Easter is not it's not just a once in every year journey. It's a lifetime journey. And Jesus' Easter journey didn't begin with his resurrection, and neither does yours and ours. So, where does it begin? It began in the wilderness. In the wilderness. So, let's take and understand that that mantle of real creative power was placed upon his shoulders during that time in which he entered into the wilderness. And let's try to understand what that might mean for you and I. And in Matthew, chapters 3 and 4, we have these verses that we'll start with. Matthew 3:16. And when Jesus was baptized, he went up immediately from the water. And behold, the heavens were opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And lo, a voice from heaven saying, This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. And then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And he fasted 40 days and 40 nights, and afterward he was hungry. Well, I'm sure he was. I know I would be, and you would be too. Kind of, maybe, sort of, might make you and me think that this spiritual power stuff is going to ask for you and I, on our parts, to do some work. So first, let's understand that this story is for our personal growth. And the Bible is truly a story from the beginning of Genesis all the way through Revelation about how you and I learn how to be born of spirit so that the divinity or the expression of you and I as a child of God in its fullness becomes made manifest, becomes that Christ nature, having that mind in you and me that was Christ. Okay. That was in Christ Jesus as well. So the baptism symbolizes an experience of letting go of error or sin as we talk about it. And I wonder, do you realize and do you understand that Jesus had to get ready for a miracle just like you and I do? Okay. So there was this moment when he had this realization, and it was such a profound realization of truth. The heavens were opened is what that means. He had this moment when he got his oneness with God. He understood it fully, and his very thinking and feeling had come to this tipping point in which he had let go of so many levels of personality, if you will, that dealt in grievances and resentments and all the things that some of us can get caught up in. And we do. We just do. And his whole being, when he became ready to be baptized, his whole being, this was about letting go of all of that stuff. And that's what that really means for you and I too. And so the Spirit of God descending like a dove, that next verse. Now, dove is that non-resistant peace of mind in which you and I are confident in the outworking of divine law. And so the Spirit of God is that thought process or that belief or the faith that comes into you and me that the things that God has called us to will be done through us. And the connections we need to make and the changes we need to make within ourselves, they just happen because we're open to it and we're ready for it. These thoughts of God, they're the truth. There's the only begotten, that in whom this is my beloved, in whom I am well pleased. As you and I take on living in these thoughts, they are love, praise, discernment, wisdom, strength, bounty, these things and all kinds of them, just like that, peace. As we embody those, as those become our natural way of thinking and feeling, and those are our responses automatically, then you and I become that Son of God. We embody that which we were fully created to be and to live, just as Jesus was. He said, "Follow thou me." He wasn't kidding. He wasn't saying, you're going to try to follow me, but, I just want you to worship me. He never wanted that, and neither are we supposed to. And that's not what God created him for. Gave him as our way shower and our teacher. So let's continue. Okay. All right. So this is my beloved in whom I am well pleased. You and I make a choice to make a commitment to enter fully into this experience of living from our very thinking and feeling, automatically coming from that place of God thoughts, God's will for us. God's will for us. And that water baptism is the cleansing of energy, how it causes a dissipation of the residual or even the beginnings of stepping into certain things. And so you and I are called to experience that. And we get ready for a miracle. That's simply a recognition point. And we're ready to let all that other stuff go. There is a greater good that you and I can experience in this world, and that we can help this world to experience, and others can experience. And we can be examples. And that is part of what we are called to do as human beings. And so I invite you to understand that the wilderness is not good, it's not bad. It simply is a state of consciousness that holds all of our undisciplined and uncultivated thinking and feeling nature. All right? It's a consciousness of that. And when Jesus was led up by the Spirit, okay, to be tempted, he went into this self-inventory process, if you will. He examined himself fully because he, like you and I, knew that we have to look beyond our immediate responses and find out what it is that's triggering them. If it's not being triggered by love, if it's not being triggered by a hope for good or that sense of understanding whatever's going on, then it's going to be triggered by fear and doubts, or all of the types of things that we hold, and even in our own bodies. Fear of abuse or remembrances of difficulties and those projections that we hold. So anyway, he fasted 40 days and 40 nights. 40 simply means it takes what it takes. It's a time of spiritual preparation. And that fasting 40 days and 40 nights means that spiritual preparation is completed. It is complete. It means that you've come to a place where you're ready to begin that real deep inner work. And you're ready to respond. You're ready to respond rather than simply react to all the trigger points that in any number of things in our lives. It's vital that you and I learn to control those impulses, those temptations, the sinful impulses as we call them, in such a way that we deal with them from a level of truth. Think of it this way. It's kind of like trying to handle 220 power with 110 volt wiring. Now, I'm not an electrician, but maybe you can get the idea. It's inadequate wiring when you add faulty connections and ignorance. It creates a fire. And those fires happen not only in buildings, but in our lives. Our spiritual journey can be one fire after another if we don't choose to do this wilderness work. Do you ever see that original Star Trek episode where the crew of the Enterprise goes to this planet that has this godlike being on it who can make things appear and disappear at will. And he seems to perform what the crew are what only God can do. And many of them begin to think this is God. And this same powerful being then begins to create a wave of destruction when he doesn't get his way. During the course of this episode, as it comes to the end, we realize that this being is a child of a very advanced race of beings. And when the parents come, what we hear and understand is that this child is going to be made aware, who will receive some correction, so to speak, about that misuse of his power and the willfulness and abuse that he did and the harm he created. That same power has the potential to unite, to heal, to create good, can be used to wound, to separate us from one another and to create harm. Sometimes our creative power is immature and we use it in willful ways, and we can do a lot of harm before we're ready for a miracle. I encourage you to take on the mantle of power. It's an awesome and sacred responsibility, and one you will never regret. As you begin to deal with the temptations of power, because the flow of power through you and I, and anyone who doesn't utilize loving and mature standards or practices, can create an incredible amount of evil. Now, evil is simply that which causes suffering. And that's the translation from the Bible of the word evil. And oftentimes, damage is done before we realize what's happening. And sadly, because we didn't mean to, doesn't mean that we don't hurt others or ourselves. So let us continue with this idea. Jesus was tempted by the devil. That was the next verse. He faces the devil, or Satan. And let's explore that for a moment, because in Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah, the term Satan is usually translated as opponent or adversary, or liar in wait. And sometimes he's regarded as a heavenly prosecutor or accuser, and he's often understood to represent that sinful impulse, temptation, or more generally, the forces that you and I experience that prevent you and I from submitting to God's will, divine will. All right. The very word sin, I'm going to get a little off track here for a moment. The word sin was an archery term. And since the devil embodies that sinful impulse, I think it's important we understand sin too. It was an archery term. And there was, when the archer would send forth the arrow, the first practice, so to speak, there was someone who would say, sin left, sin right, in order for the archer to then know that they needed to correct left, right, up, down. And so they could hit the very center of the target so that they could be right on target. And the whole energy in the Bible of the word sin is about getting on target. And it doesn't hold the kind of energy that so much does today. And neither did the devil. With that understanding, can you see how the devil is really anything that brings up for you and me when our thinking and our feeling are in error? And that it's helpful. But that embodiment of evil, that embodiment of harm expressed by ourselves or others, can be twisted and our power as power and misunderstood without that loving and creative use of power. In unity, we believe that the devil is not a power unto itself. It is not this being who has its own expression and life force. It is simply a product of human consciousness that is brought about by the willful or immature distortions of power and the creative energy of the universe. And the only power that it has is what you and I give it. And as you and I quit empowering those ways of living, evil dissipates and has no power. It doesn't mean that that's not a powerful force in us or in the world. And it doesn't mean that we don't need to confront or challenge it, just as Jesus did. But it's important to understand this whole miracle of resurrection began with this wilderness experience and owning power. Utilizing spiritual principles like Jesus to fix and hold within ourselves truth so that it dissipates the pull of temptation. And afterwards, he was hungry. I'll say he was. You and I wield incredible power, and as we begin to claim our spiritual power and prowess, taking this action in our lives leaves us hungry or yearning to find that fulfillment or to experience this dream or hope or to have something that we have been inspired with come into fruition. So let's bring all this down to what this means for you and me. To fulfill any dream we have in life, we will be utilizing or drawing upon spiritual power. The type of energy that you and I use or enter into this dream, hope, fulfillment, is what forms how you and I become, who you and I become. And it helps you and I to understand that that life that we experience is a result of that energy. If you and I first enter into the wilderness and develop from our own consciousness and address the undisciplined and uncultivated God thoughts even, and begin to cultivate God thoughts, if we make those choices based from God thoughts, you and I build these inner resources that we need to effectively and maturely deal with the temptations that are inherent in power. So just like in TV land, to be continued, we've come to where this part of the message concludes. I invite you to be ready to join us. I'll give you a spoiler alert. In message number 2, Ready for a Miracle, my next message, Jesus shows us how to do just that. God bless you. Would you like to join me in a prayer? If it feels comfortable, close your eyes. Precious Spirit, thank you for filling us with your Spirit and your power, allowing us to use that power that is within us for good. And just as Jesus and other spiritual masters teach us, may we rise above any challenge that comes, not only from within, but from around us. May we draw upon your power to heal, to comfort, to bless. And we ask that you reveal your expression, allowing us to be that child of God, the Son of God, that gives us that power of life to deal with miracles, to express miracles, to know that no matter what comes our way, God, you are the source. You are the source of all that is and the power within us. May we call upon God thoughts. And when we feel that we cannot go another step, may we summon from you that zeal and the energy that we need to continue in life. And if we notice discord, if we find within ourselves that we are not living in integrity, ethically, and in alignment, may we release those limitations and turn with our imagination and our love and our delight into you. Precious Spirit, thank you for the power to live this day on purpose, with heart and mind focused on you. And may we know that in each experience you will teach us, that we will live and can live in God thoughts. Help us to grow in that way. And may we know so much more about how to be ready for a miracle. God bless. Thank you. Amen and amen.